Freedom begins the day you stop defending your past. You think you've moved on. You think your past is behind you. But if you listen closely, it's still speaking. Every time you feel the need to explain who you used to be, you don't carry your past. You protect it. You defend it every time you say, I was different back then, or I only did that because. It sounds like healing, but it's really fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being seen without your story to shield you. The truth is, most people don't live in their past. They live for it. They wake up every day trying to prove that the old version of themselves was justified. Every excuse, every explanation, every silent attempt to control how others remember you is another brick in the prison you built with your own hands. The door is open, yet you stay inside, rearranging the same memories, trying to make them look like redemption. You've mistaken defense for peace. But the more you try to defend your past, the louder it becomes. It starts to dictate your tone, your choices, your silence. It whispers that you can't change because changing would mean betraying the person you used to be. It convinces you that guilt equals loyalty, that to move forward is to abandon the ones you hurt or the one who was hurt. That's how the past survives, not through memory, but through repetition. Every justification is an echo. Every apology repeated too many times is a chain, and every time you tell your story to prove you've changed, you remain the same. Freedom doesn't come when the past stops haunting you. It comes when you stop defending it. When you finally stop needing others to understand, to forgive, to see the full picture. Because the truth is they won't, and they don't need to. The only one who has to understand your past is you, and you don't need words for that. Just acceptance. Your story is not your sentence, but you'll never be free until you stop standing guard at the walls that keep it alive. The invisible chains, why you keep explaining yourself. There's a reason you keep returning to the same explanations, the same stories, the same need to justify what's already gone. Deep down, you believe that if people could understand why you acted the way you did, they would still accept you. You think that understanding equals forgiveness, that logic can rewrite pain. But it never does. Because the past doesn't live in memory, it lives in emotion. And emotions don't care about explanations. You defend your past because part of you still wants to be seen as good. You still crave redemption in the eyes of others. Or maybe in your own. The human mind fears rejection more than failure. That's why it clings to old versions of itself like a wounded animal guarding its scars. You explain because you want to control the narrative, to make your pain look noble, your mistakes look necessary. But in doing that, you keep your power outside of you. You keep waiting for someone else to validate your transformation before you can own it. It's a silent form of slavery. Not to people, but to the image of yourself you once were. Every time you say, I was young, or I didn't know better, you're not moving on. You're negotiating with the past, begging it to be kinder. But it never is. Because the past doesn't listen, it mirrors. It reflects exactly what you project onto it. If you defend, it accuses. If you explain, it questions. If you let go, it disappears. The Stoics taught that freedom begins in the mind, and the mind finds peace only when it stops trying to control what cannot be controlled. The opinions, the memories, the judgments of others. What remains is choice. The choice to stop rehearsing old defenses and start living by new standards. You cannot rewrite your past, but you can stop performing it. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to become someone who no longer needs convincing. The hidden ego trap, when healing becomes self-protection. There's a subtle moment when healing turns into self-defense. You tell yourself you're growing, learning, becoming wiser. But somewhere in that process, your ego takes the lead. It starts to build a new identity around your progress. You begin to collect lessons like trophies, repeat phrases like, I've moved on, or I've learned my worth. But underneath it all, something inside still needs to be seen, still needs to prove that the pain was worth something. That's not healing. That's management. The ego is clever. It can disguise attachment as awareness. It convinces you that reflection is freedom when it's really a new kind of armor. You curate your story, refining it until it sounds noble, until every wound has meaning and every mistake has become wisdom. But if you look deeper, you'll notice that the story still circles around you, around the same identity you claim to have outgrown. That's how the ego survives loss, by turning the ruins into monuments. It's not that healing itself is false, it's that you start using it to protect the same illusion, the need to be understood, admired, or forgiven. You turn pain into a narrative, and the narrative becomes a mask. You talk about your transformation so much that you forget to live it. The mind becomes addicted to self-improvement, the way the body becomes addicted to comfort. You want to feel in control of your growth, but real transformation doesn't happen through control. It happens through surrender. Freedom begins when you stop polishing your story and start releasing it. When you realize that no one needs to know how far you've come, how strong you've been, or how much you've endured. Silence becomes the most honest proof of evolution, because the moment you stop performing your healing, you finally begin to live it. The turning point: radical acceptance without justification. Acceptance isn't agreement. It's not saying, "What happened was right." It's saying, "It happened, and I no longer need to carry it." Most people think letting go means forgiving or forgetting, but real freedom doesn't depend on memory or apology. It begins in the quiet realization that your past no longer deserves an explanation. You stop needing to understand every detail of why things unfolded the way they did. You stop searching for closure that never comes. You start living without permission from what once broke you. Radical acceptance means removing emotion from what's already finished. It means you stop arguing with reality, stop asking why me or what if. You learn to face life as it is, not as it should have been. That's where discipline meets peace. Because the moment you stop fighting the truth, you regain your strength to shape what comes next. The Stoics understood this deeply. What's done is done. The only power you have now is in how you meet what remains. This kind of peace isn't warm or sentimental. It's clear, cold, and honest. It doesn't need comforting words, it needs courage. You begin to see that acceptance doesn't shrink you. It expands you beyond your old narrative. You no longer have to keep explaining your pain because it no longer defines your voice. You no longer have to fix the past because you finally understand it cannot follow where you're going. Freedom doesn't come from rewriting your story. It comes from not needing a story at all. To accept is to release yourself from the endless courtroom of memory, where you've been both the judge and the defendant. Acceptance is walking out of that room, closing the door, and realizing there was never a trial, only you, holding yourself captive. The mirror of the present. Who are you without your story? If tomorrow no one remembered who you used to be, who would you become? Without the labels, the apologies, the history you repeat to make sense of yourself, what would remain? Most people live inside their own reflection, trapped in the mirror of memory. They see not what is, but what was, and spend their lives trying to fix an image that no longer exists. You are not the person who made those choices. You are the consciousness that remembers them. The story you've been defending is comfortable because it gives you a sense of identity, even when it hurts. Pain is familiar, uncertainty isn't. That's why letting go feels like dying. You're not just releasing memories. You're erasing a version of yourself that once gave you purpose, even if that purpose was survival. But that version is gone. The world doesn't need your explanations. It needs your presence. Look around. Every second that passes is asking you a question. Are you here, or are you still living in defense of someone who no longer exists? Real growth begins when you stop trying to protect your old reflection and start becoming someone new without needing to announce it. When you can walk through life without the weight of proving you've changed, that's evolution. The mirror of the present doesn't lie. but it demands honesty. It reflects only what's alive now, your choices, your discipline, your peace. The past cannot stand in this mirror. It fades every time you act from awareness instead of fear, every time you choose silence over explanation, every time you allow yourself to be seen without the story attached. Freedom is not forgetting who you were. It's realizing you don't have to be that person anymore. The past is not your foundation, it's your contrast. It shows you how far you've come and how far you can still go when you stop looking back. The rebirth. Living without the need to explain. The moment you stop explaining yourself, life becomes quieter. Not because the world stops asking, but because you stop needing to answer. You begin to understand that freedom is not found in proving who you are, but in living it. True transformation doesn't need witnesses. It's not loud. It doesn't ask for recognition. It simply is. Living without the need to explain means you start choosing peace over performance. You stop narrating your evolution and start embodying it. Your energy shifts from "let me show you" to "let me be." You no longer waste words trying to convince people that you've changed, because those who are meant to see it already do, and those who don't were never meant to. The silence that used to feel like punishment becomes power. It becomes a space where you can finally listen to yourself, to life, to what's actually here. Freedom looks ordinary from the outside. It's in the calm tone when someone misjudges you and you no longer feel the urge to defend. It's in walking away from conversations that lead nowhere. It's in knowing you have nothing to prove to anyone, not even to the version of you who swore you'd never make another mistake. You understand that mistakes are not threats to your identity. They're reminders that you're still alive, still capable of becoming more. This is what the Stoics meant by mastery, not controlling life, but mastering your response to it. Discipline stops being punishment and becomes peace. Silence stops being weakness and becomes wisdom. You realize that explaining yourself was never about connection. It was about fear, the fear of being misunderstood, unloved, unseen. But now you see that love doesn't need to be proven, and understanding doesn't need to be earned. You live lighter because you've stopped dragging explanations behind you. You've stopped performing your past. Every step you take now belongs entirely to the present. That is rebirth. Not the creation of a new self, but the release of the one that no longer needs defending. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. You don't celebrate it with words or declarations. You feel it in the spaces where you used to explain yourself. You notice it in the calm that replaces guilt, in the pauses that no longer need to be filled, in the way you can finally sit with your own story without needing to edit it. Silence becomes your liberation, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of peace. You no longer rush to fix how others see you because you've made peace with how you see yourself. The urge to clarify, to justify, to prove fades, and what's left is stillness, strength, and a kind of quiet dignity that no approval could ever give. When you stop defending your past, you stop dividing yourself between who you were and who you are. The past stops being an identity and becomes what it was always meant to be, a teacher. Its purpose is finished the moment you stop trying to make it make sense. So you let it rest. You let yourself rest. Because the war between who you were and who you're becoming finally ends when you stop picking a side. The person you were no longer exists, and the person you're becoming doesn't need defense, only direction. Freedom begins when the noise fades, when you no longer need to be right, understood, or redeemed, when silence speaks for you, when your peace becomes your proof. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth. You don't need to justify the way you healed. The moment you stop defending your past, you're no longer bound by it. That's when you finally understand. Freedom isn't found in words. Freedom is the silence that remains when they're no longer needed. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Take a moment of silence and not to think, but to decide. Decide that from today, you will stop explaining who you were and start becoming who you are meant to be. Because your peace begins in the moments you no longer seek validation. If this reflection gave you clarity or strength, subscribe to the channel and stay close. Here, every video is a mirror, made to help you rebuild your mind, regain your discipline, and reconnect with the part of you that life tried to bury. Share this video with someone who is still fighting their past. Let it be a reminder that silence is not weakness, it's power. You're not behind, you're not broken. You're simply at the point where freedom begins. Stay grounded, stay disciplined, and remember, the future needs the version of you that no longer explains, only lives.